The Red Wolves Motorcycle Club thought they'd found their next extortion target in Riverside Valley, a war widow in a wheelchair who managed a small community center. Their attempt to intimidate her would become their worst nightmare. What they didn't know was that Rachel Martinez wasn't just a disabled military spouse. She was one of the most decorated undercover narcotics officers in FBI history. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will leave you speechless. The autumn chill clung to Riverside Valley's tree-lined streets as Rachel Martinez guided her wheelchair along Cedar Avenue. At 48, her raven hair streaked with silver and strong shoulders spoke of someone who refused to let circumstances define her. Local shopkeepers offered familiar waves as she passed Wilson's bakery, where old Pete Wilson was already arranging his morning pastry display. The aroma of fresh coffee drifted from Mary's Corner Café, where Mary Chen had been serving the town's best breakfast for over 15 years. Ray paused at the entrance to the Riverside Community Center, her trained eyes automatically scanning the street. Habits from her years of undercover work didn't fade easily, even after 3 years of civilian life. The modest brick building had become her sanctuary after losing her husband Michael in Afghanistan, a place where she could honor his memory by helping local families while maintaining her cover as a grieving widow. The sign above the door read Riverside Valley Family Center, its blue paint fresh from last month's community repaint day. Inside, morning light filtered through tall windows, casting warm patterns across the polished hardwood floor. Tony Coach Rodriguez was already there, setting up chairs for the morning's youth mentoring program. The former high school basketball coach looked up as she entered, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "Morning, Ray," he called out, his deep voice carrying the same steady calm that had guided countless troubled teens toward better paths. "Coffee's fresh." Before she could respond, the distant rumble of motorcycles shattered the morning quiet. Ray's hands stilled on her wheelchair's rims, her mind automatically calculating angles and approaches. Through the windows, she watched. 8 motorcycles roar into view, their chrome and black paint gleaming menacingly in the sunlight. "Red Wolves," Coach muttered, moving to stand beside her. "They've been taking over towns up and down the coast. Heard they turned Millbrook into their personal playground last month." The bikers parked in a practiced formation that blocked most of the street. Their leader, a tall man whose leather cut displayed the patch Ghost, dismounted with deliberate arrogance. Behind him, 6 others spread out, Bear, built like a defensive lineman, Shadow, whose fluid movements screamed military training, Razor, whose jacket bulged with obvious weapons, Storm, whose hands never left his vest pockets, and Wolf, whose eyes constantly scanned for threats. Mary Chen hurried to lock her cafe's door as they approached, but she wasn't fast enough. Ghost caught the handle first, his smile all predator and promise of pain. "Now that ain't neighborly," he said, voice carrying across the quiet street. "We're just some hungry travelers looking for breakfast." Ray watched through the community center windows as Mary reluctantly reopened her door, her mind cataloging details automatically. Ghosts, military bearing, Shadow's favoring of his right knee, the way Razor's jacket hung indicating a shoulder holster. "Should we call the police?" Coach asked quietly. "Not yet," Ray replied, her voice carrying the calm of countless undercover operations. "Let's see what they're really after." The answer came sooner than expected. While Ghost and 2 others entered the café, Bear and Storm approached the community center, their boots scraping deliberately across the clean sidewalk as they pushed through the door. "Well, ain't this sweet?" Bear drawled, his massive frame filling the doorway. "Real nice family place you got here." Ray positioned her wheelchair carefully, noting angles and distances, keeping both men in view. Coach stood his ground by the Coffee station, his posture relaxed but ready. Center opens at 9, Ray said evenly. You're welcome to return then. Storm laughed, the sound empty of warmth. Ain't here for your programs, lady. Town's changing. Businesses need protection these days. Accidents happen. Through the windows, Ray could see Ghost watching from the cafe, his predatory gaze measuring. Responses. She had seen that look before in places far from Riverside Valley's quiet streets, the calculation of a criminal sizing up potential victims, planning dominance. The community center doesn't pay protection money, she stated firmly. Never has, never will. Bear's smile turned ugly, brave words from someone who can't even stand up. He kicked her wheelchair, not hard enough to tip it, just enough to demonstrate power. Be a shame if something happened to your nice building, or to the kids who come here for help. Coach took a step forward, but Ray raised her hand slightly. Wait. She met Bear's gaze steadily, letting none of her tactical calculations show. You're making a mistake. No, lady, Storm replied, dropping all pretense of friendliness. You're the one making a mistake. Ghost wants $2 grand by Friday. After that, the price goes up along with the accidents. They swaggered out, leaving behind the stink of leather and threat. Through the windows, Ray watched them return to the cafe, where Mary Chen served them with trembling hands, while Ghost held court like a conquering king. We should call the police, Coach repeated, but his voice carried doubt. Riverside Valley's law enforcement had been suspiciously quiet since Red Wolves first appeared 2 weeks ago. Not yet, Ray replied, her mind already formulating plans. First, we need to understand what we're really dealing with. She wheeled herself to the office, where a hidden compartment contained surveillance equipment she'd hoped never to need again. They think they found an easy target. Time to let them keep thinking that while we learn everything about them. Coach studied her face, recognition dawning in his eyes. You've seen their type before, in places far from here. They're not just thugs looking for easy money, she confirmed quietly. That military bearing, the practiced formations, the way they gauge responses, they're testing the town's defenses, looking for weak points. This is just the beginning. As if confirming her words, Ghost's voice carried from the cafe, loud, enough for the street to hear. Riverside Valley's going to learn some new rules, starting today. Ray began unpacking her surveillance gear, her movements precise and practiced. The wind carried the rumble of more motorcycles approaching the town, and with them the certainty that Riverside Valley's peaceful days were ending. The Red Wolves. MC thought they had found an easy mark in a disabled war widow. They were about to learn why appearances could be deceiving, and why some battles are won long before the first shot is fired. Evening shadows crept across Riverside Valley as Ray positioned herself near the Red Wolves' newly established clubhouse. The abandoned auto repair shop at the edge of town had been transformed over the past week, its broken windows replaced with dark-tinted glass, security cameras mounted at strategic angles. Through her surveillance scope, she watched members come and go, noting patterns and hierarchies. Coach's voice came quietly through her earpiece. Sheriff Anderson just left the clubhouse, 3rd time this week. Money changing hands? Ray asked, though she already knew the answer. She'd seen the envelope Ghost had passed to the sheriff, watching Anderson's face as he pocketed what was clearly more than a campaign donation. Like clockwork, Coach confirmed. Mary's got more information too. You need to hear this. The Café had closed early, officially for equipment maintenance. In reality, Mary Chen had turned it into an impromptu meeting place away from the gang's prying eyes. Ray wheeled herself through the back entrance where Coach waited with Mary. The usually composed cafe owner's hands shook slightly as she poured coffee. They're bringing in drugs, Mary said quietly, setting down the pot. I overheard Storm and Razor talking, not just dealing. They're setting up labs, using abandoned properties as production sites. Ghost called it pharmaceutical expansion. A motorcycle rumbled past the cafe, its rider scanning the darkened windows. They waited in silence until the sound faded. "That's not all," Mary continued, her voice harder now. "In San Diego, before I moved here, my nephew got caught up in their operation. They target kids, use them as runners. Marco was 15. She paused, composing herself. "He's doing 5 years while they walk free." Coach placed a supportive hand on Mary's shoulder while Ray processed the information. "The sheriff?" she asked. "Bought and paid for," Coach confirmed. "But my contacts at the DEA say it's bigger than Anderson. There's word of similar operations in other coastal towns, all following the same pattern. Red wolves move in, corrupt. Local law enforcement, established drug labs disguised as legitimate businesses." Ray moved to the cafe's window, watching the street through a gap in the blinds. A group of bikers had cornered old Pete Wilson outside his bakery, their postures suggesting another protection discussion. "They're getting bolder," she observed, "moving faster than they did in other towns. Something's driving their timeline."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you're watching from. If you're enjoying these true crime stories, make sure to hit subscribe because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The bell above the cafe's door chimed. They tensed until they saw Linda Foster, one of the high school counselors, slip inside. Her face showed barely concealed fear. "Ray," she said quickly, "they're at the community center. Ghost and some others. They're looking for you." Through her earpiece, Ray heard the sound of breaking glass. The gang had grown tired of waiting for their protection money. "Stay here," she instructed the others. "Keep watching, keep recording." She paused at the door, her voice carrying quiet authority. "And Coach, get that package we discussed ready. We might need it sooner than we thought." The community center's windows glowed in the gathering darkness. Shadows moving inside suggesting at least 4 intruders. Ray approached openly, letting them see her coming. No point in hiding, they'd chosen this confrontation. Ghost stood in the center's main room, casually knocking over children's art supplies, while Bear and Shadow systematically broke computer equipment. Wolf watched from near the door, his stance suggesting military training. $2,000 was a reasonable offer, Ghost said without turning. "Now the price is 5, plus damages." Ray wheeled herself into the room, deliberately positioning herself with clear lines to all exits. "The center helps families in need," she said calmly. "We operate on donations." Ghost finally faced her, his smile cruel. "Everyone pays, lady, one way or another." He nodded to Bear, who moved toward the office where confidential family records were kept. "Maybe we need to know more about these families you help, their schedules, their routines, their vulnerabilities." "That's private information," Ray stated, her voice carrying an edge that made Wolf shift uneasily. Something in her tone triggered his combat instincts. "Nothing's private in our town," Ghost replied. He picked up a framed photograph of Ray with her late husband Michael, studying it with exaggerated interest. "Sweet picture. Your man was military?" Ray watched Bear disappear into the office, heard him rifling through files. One move, and she could disable Ghost before the others reacted, but not yet. The timing wasn't right. "Last chance," she said quietly. "Leave the files, leave the center, find another town." Ghost laughed, dropping the photo. Glass shattered across the floor. "Or what? You'll roll over our feet?" He turned to Shadow. "Find anything valuable, then burn it. Make an example." Ray's fingers tightened on her wheelchair's arms, but her voice remained steady. "You think because I can't walk, I can't fight back. That's your first mistake." "Yeah?" Ghost leaned down, getting in her face. "And what's my second?" "Assuming I'm alone." Right on cue, Coach's voice crackled through her hidden earpiece. "Surveillance photos uploaded. Financial records documented. Sheriff Anderson's payoffs recorded. Just say the word." Ray allowed herself a small smile, one that made Ghost straighten up uncertainly. "You have until morning to clear out of my center," she said quietly. "After that we stop playing nice." "You threatening me?" Ghost's voice carried genuine amusement. "Lady, you have no idea what you're dealing with." "No," she replied, wheeling herself toward the door. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, but you're about to find out." Later, reviewing surveillance footage with Coach and Mary, Ray watched Ghost make calls to what was clearly a superior in their organization. His agitation suggested her response hadn't followed their usual pattern of intimidation and submission. "They'll escalate now," Coach warned. "Come at us harder." "Good," Ray replied, studying images of vehicles arriving at the clubhouse late at night. "Let them show us more of their operation. The harder they push, the more evidence we gather." Mary looked up from documents showing money transfers between Red Wolf's fronts and offshore accounts. "The drug labs they're setting up. We can't wait too long. They're already recruiting kids as lookouts." "No," Ray agreed, her mind already formulating plans. "But when we move, we take down their entire operation, not just here but everywhere they've corrupted. Sometimes you have to let the enemy think they're winning, let them get confident, sloppy. That's when they show you everything you need to destroy them." Outside, more motorcycles rumbled through Riverside Valley streets, their riders unaware. They were being watched, documented, analyzed. The Red Wolves MC thought they were tightening their grip on another small town. They didn't realize they were providing evidence of their own destruction, one arrogant move at a time. The dawn light hadn't yet touched Riverside Valley when Mary Chen found the first teenager. He was young, maybe 14, unconscious behind the cafe's dumpster. Needle marks dotted his arms, and his breathing was dangerously shallow. Mary immediately called Ray while checking his pulse. Within minutes, Ray wheeled herself through the cafe's back entrance, Coach following with medical supplies. The boy stirred weakly as they approached. "You're safe now," Ray assured him, keeping her distance. "Can you tell us your name?" "Tommy," he whispered. "Tommy Rodriguez. Please, they'll kill me if they know I talked." Coach knelt beside him, checking his vitals with practiced efficiency. Pupils dilated, pulse irregular. They've got him on something heavy. Before they could learn more, motorcycle engines roared to life nearby. Through the cafe windows, Ray watched Ghost and his crew pull up outside, earlier than their usual breakfast run. Their body language screamed aggression. "Get him to the safe house," Ray instructed Coach. "Mary, act normal. They can't know he was here." The cafe's bell chimed as Ghost entered, followed by Bear and Wolf. Their usual arrogance was tinged with something else. Tension, urgency. Behind them, an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit stepped in, his bearing military despite his civilian clothes. "Special breakfast meeting," Ghost announced, his forced smile not reaching his eyes. "Close up." Mary moved to protest, but Ray caught her eye, shaking her head slightly. Better to observe, to gather intelligence. The suited man studied Ray with uncomfortable intensity. "Marcus Kane," he introduced himself, though Ray knew that wasn't his real name. "Ghost tells me you're causing problems for our business ventures." "Just running a community center," Ray replied mildly, positioning her wheelchair to keep everyone in view, "helping families in need." Kane's smile was cold. "Admirable work, but Riverside Valley is changing. Progress requires cooperation." Through her hidden earpiece, Coach's voice reported Tommy was secure. Ray allowed herself to relax marginally, focusing on the immediate threat. "Mayor Phillips has already shown proper cooperation," Kane continued, "as has your sheriff. Smart people adapt to change." "Some changes aren't progress," Ray responded. "Some are just evil wearing a new mask." Kane's facade cracked slightly. He nodded to Bear, who moved to lock the cafe's door. Outside, more bikers took up positions, isolating the building. "Let me be clear," Kane said quietly. "We're not asking anymore. The community center will be repurposed for our needs. Your client files will give us leverage over any troublemakers. And you," he leaned closer, "you'll either help us manage the operation or you'll have an unfortunate accident. Lots of hazards for someone in your condition." Ray's fingers tightened imperceptibly on her wheelchair's arms, but her voice remained calm. "You're right about one thing. There are lots of hazards in Riverside Valley these days." She pressed a hidden button on her chair. Immediately, surveillance photos appeared on every phone in the cafe. Images of Red Wolf's operations, money, changing hands with corrupt officials, drug labs being set up, teenagers being recruited. Kane's face tightened as he checked his buzzing phone. "Just a sample," Ray explained. "There's more, all uploaded to secure servers. If anything happens to me or anyone in this town, it goes public. Every operation, every payoff, every crime." "Oh, you're bluffing," Ghost snarled, but Kane raised his hand, studying Ray with new appreciation. "You're not just some grieving widow, are you?" he asked softly. "You should ask yourself why I chose to run a community center," Ray replied. "How many law enforcement contacts come through here? How many still have connections, skills, loyalty to their former partners?" As if on cue, vehicles began parking outside the cafe. Local business owners emerged. Mechanics, teachers, shopkeepers, all carrying themselves with the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement. They took up casual positions, drinking coffee, reading newspapers, creating a clear message. The town wasn't undefended. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will leave you absolutely speechless. Kane straightened his tie, his calculation visible. "This changes nothing. We own this town, one way or another. You'll learn to cooperate." "Maybe," Ray acknowledged. "But ask yourself, is Riverside Valley worth the exposure, the risk? There are other towns, easier targets." "You think a few photos scare us?" Ghost demanded. But again, Kane silenced him with a gesture. "You've made your point," Kane said finally. "For now, but this isn't over." "No," Ray agreed. "It's just beginning." They left the cafe, motorcycles roaring in frustrated fury. The undercover officers outside maintained their casual poses, but their message was clear. The town had protectors. Later in the community center's secure basement, Ray reviewed surveillance footage with Coach and Mary. Tommy Rodriguez's testimony had confirmed their worst fears. Red Wolves was running a sophisticated drug operation, using teenagers as disposable labor and small towns as distribution hubs. "Kane's visit means we're hurting them," Coach observed, "but they'll hit back harder now." "Yes," Ray agreed, studying building plans of the gang's properties. "That's exactly what we want. The higher-ups get involved, the more evidence we gather, the more their real operation is exposed." Mary looked up from documents showing property transfers to shell companies. "Mayor Phillips is hosting a town meeting tomorrow, probably trying to calm people down after Tommy's overdose." "Good," Ray replied, her mind already formulating plans. "Time to show Riverside Valley exactly who's trying to take over their town. Sometimes the best way to fight corruption is to drag it into the light." Outside, more Red Wolves members patrolled the streets, their presence meant to intimidate. Instead, they found themselves watched by undercover officers who understood surveillance, by townspeople who'd lost their fear, by a community slowly awakening to its own strength. In her basement command center, Ray began mobilizing resources she'd hoped never to need again. Kane had been right about one thing. She wasn't just some grieving widow. She was an undercover officer who'd spent her career dismantling criminal organizations. Red Wolves thought they were fighting a small-town turf war. They were about to learn they'd stumbled into a carefully prepared trap, years in the making. "They'll come at us through Phillips first," she explained to her growing team. "Use legal pressure, building inspections, permit violations. When that fails, they'll try direct force. We'll be ready for both." Coach studied her face, recognition dawning. You've been preparing for something like this since you came to Riverside Valley, haven't you? Evil doesn't stop just because we're tired of fighting it, Ray replied quietly. Sometimes the best defense is being ready when it arrives. Through the basement windows, she watched Red Wolves' motorcycles circle the community center like vultures, their riders unaware they were being documented, analyzed, mapped. Kane thought he'd found another weak town to exploit. Instead, he'd discovered a fortress of resistance, guarded by warriors who understood that some battles choose you, whether you want them or not. The Riverside Valley Community Hall was packed, beyond capacity. Mayor Phillips stood at the podium, his polished appearance at odds with the tension in the room. Ray positioned her wheelchair near the back, observing as Red Wolves members strategically placed themselves around the hall's perimeter. Ghost lounged near the entrance, attempting casualness despite the weight of his concealed weapon. Our town is experiencing growing pains, Phillips announced, his practiced smile never wavering. The recent business acquisitions by Red Wolf enterprises represent legitimate investment in our community's future. From her position, Ray watched Mary Chen silently distribute photographs to key community members, images showing Phillips accepting payoffs behind his office. The mayor's words faltered as he noticed the shifting expressions in his audience. Furthermore, allegations of criminal activity are completely unfounded. Like the payoff you took last Tuesday. Pete Wilson stood up, waving one of Mary's photos. This shows you taking money from known criminals. The hall erupted into chaos. Coach's voice came through Ray's earpiece. Bear and Storm are moving toward Pete, shadows covering the back. Exit? Ray pressed a button on her chair's armrest. Instantly, the hall's projector flickered to life, displaying surveillance footage of Phillips meeting with Kane, discussing drug operations and youth recruitment programs. That's not, Phillips stammered, but his denials were drowned out by angry shouts from the crowd. Sheriff Anderson burst through the doors, his face red with barely contained panic. This meeting is over. Everyone clear the hall. Why, Sheriff? Ray's voice cut through the noise, carrying the authority of command. Afraid we'll see more evidence of your corruption. She nodded to Mary, who activated a second video showing Anderson accepting envelopes from Ghost. Ghost's hand moved toward his jacket, but froze as 4 of Ray's undercover officers casually shifted positions, their law enforcement training evident in their stance. Even outnumbered, Red Wolves enforcers recognized the threat of trained professionals. These allegations are ridiculous, Phillips blustered. Red Wolf Enterprises is bringing jobs, development, and drugs, a new voice declared. Linda Foster stood, her hands shaking but her voice steady. Like they did to my student Tommy Rodriguez, like they're doing to kids across 3 states. More community members rose, sharing stories of intimidation, of missing teenagers, of corruption that had poisoned their town. Through it all, Ray watched Ghost's face, noting the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. This wasn't the simple takeover he'd expected. This meeting is illegally assembled, Anderson announced, reaching for his handcuffs. Mrs. Martinez, you're under arrest for what, Sheriff? Coach stepped forward, his phone recording everything. Exposing corruption, protecting kids from drug dealers. Think carefully about your next move. The tension built until Mayor Phillips suddenly clutched his chest, staggering at the podium. As paramedics rushed forward, Ray noticed him slip something into Ghost's hand. A phone, maybe a hard drive. Clear the hall, Anderson ordered, using the mayor's conveniently timed heart problem to end the meeting. But the damage was done. Riverside Valley had seen the truth about its leadership. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this true crime story, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will reveal a shocking twist that no one saw coming. Later in the community center basement, Ray reviewed surveillance footage with her expanding team. Phillips's attack was staged, she explained. He passed something to Ghost right before he fell. Ghost took it straight to their compound, Coach reported, displaying fresh photos. But he seemed different, troubled. He should be, Mary added, laying out documents on the planning table. 3 more kids overdosed in Millbrook. They're talking to federal investigators. Ray studied the patterns emerging from their intelligence. The drug operation is just part of it. Red Wolves is providing muscle for something bigger. International drug cartels using small towns as distribution networks. Through her surveillance feeds, she watched Ghost pace in his office, arguing with someone on the phone. His agitation suggested growing doubts about his role in the operation. He's former law enforcement, Ray observed. Probably narcotics before something went wrong. He signed up for a criminal enterprise, not watching kids die from bad drugs. Can we use that? Coach asked. Turn him. Maybe, Ray replied. But first we need to understand what Phillips gave him. Whatever it was, it's important enough to... Her words cut off as multiple alerts lit up their surveillance system. Red Wolves members were mobilizing, loading weapons into vans. They're moving early, Coach reported, checking camera feeds. At least 20 bikes plus support vehicles. Heavy weapons. They're not coming for us, Ray realized, studying their formation. Not yet. They're heading to Millbrook, going to clean up loose ends before the federal investigation gets traction. Mary's face paled. The overdose victims, the witnesses. Exactly. Ray activated her communications network, mobilizing undercover officers across 3 counties. Coach, get our people in position. Mary, activate the Safe House network. They think they're covering their tracks. Instead, they're going to lead us right to their entire operation. Outside, Red Wolves' motorcycles roared to life, their riders unaware they were being tracked by satellite, by traffic cameras, by a network of law enforcement officers who understood counter-surveillance. Ghost led them out of town, his face set with grim determination, still clutching whatever Phillips had given him. He's conflicted, Ray noted, watching through high-powered optics, having doubts about what they've become. That makes him dangerous to Kane's operation and valuable to us. If he doesn't get himself killed first, Coach added. Sometimes good cops find themselves fighting for the wrong side, Ray replied quietly. The trick is giving them a chance to switch sides before it's too late. As night fell over Riverside Valley, Ray's network tracked Red Wolves' movement toward Millbrook. The gang thought they were moving to silence witnesses. Instead, they were riding into a trap laid by someone who'd spent her career studying how criminal organizations operated, how they thought, and most importantly, how they fell apart from the inside. Through her command center's windows, Ray watched more undercover officers arrive, drawn by calls from old colleagues, ready to stand against corruption one more time. Kane's organization had chosen Riverside Valley because they thought small. Towns were easy targets. They were about to learn why that was their biggest mistake. Rain pelted the roads between Riverside Valley and Millbrook as Red Wolves' convoy approached their target. Through night vision optics, Ray tracked their movement from a concealed position. 20 bikes, 3 vans, all heading toward the safe house where federal witnesses were being protected. Bear and Storm are leading the vans, Coach reported through her earpiece. Ghost is holding back, riding sweep. Something's off about his position. He's creating distance, Ray observed, giving himself time to react if things go wrong. She switched channels. All units maintain position. Let them get closer. The safe house sat dark and quiet, seemingly unprotected. Red Wolves advance. Team approach cautiously, their training evident in their movement patterns. Through her scope, Ray watched Ghost dismount his bike, studying the scene with growing unease. Chief, status on the package Phillips gave him. Finally got clean footage, Coach replied. Looked like a hard drive. Ghost accessed it an hour before they mobilized. Whatever he saw changed something. He's been making calls ever since. Storm signaled the vans forward, their headlights off, rolling quietly toward the house. Ray waited until they were fully committed before triggering her prepared response. "Execute containment," she commanded. Hidden floodlights blazed to life, blinding the attackers. Concealed officers emerged from prepared positions, their weapons trained on the convoy. Ray had positioned them carefully. Former narcotics agents, undercover specialists, people who understood tactical operations. "Red Wolves, you're surrounded," her voice carried through pre-positioned speakers. "Power down your vehicles, weapons on the ground." Instead, Storm opened fire, triggering a coordinated response from her officers. The night erupted in controlled chaos as Ray's people demonstrated the difference between thugs with guns and trained law enforcement. Through her scope, Ray tracked Ghost's movement. Instead of joining the fight, he was accessing something on his phone, the files from Phillips. His face showed growing horror at whatever he was seeing. "Coach, move on the vans. Mary, get your people ready for the kids." Ray wheeled herself toward Ghost's position, staying in shadows, observing his internal struggle. When he finally spoke, his voice carried genuine anguish. "This wasn't supposed to be about killing kids," he said, not turning around. "We were supposed to be businessmen, legitimate. Kane lied to us." "They're not just moving drugs through kids," Ray replied calmly. "They're using them as disposable test subjects, seeing how strong they can make the product before overdoses. Start. Phillips's files showed everything." Ghost finally faced her, his weapon lowered. "Kane's operation. It's bigger than we knew. International cartels, using small towns because no one looks too closely at rural areas. They're creating distribution networks, using kids because they're easier to control, easier to replace when they die." Gunfire continued around them, but Ray maintained focus on Ghost. "Your men trust you. You can end this before more kids die." "Some of them are true believers," Ghost warned. "Bear Storm, they're in deep with Kane. They know everything." "That's why you held back," Ray observed. "You knew this was wrong, wanted to see how it played out." An explosion lit up the night as one of the vans caught fire. Coach's voice crackled through Ray's earpiece. "We've got the kids, 8 of them, all alive. Medical team moving in." Ghost watched the scene unfold, his former teammates being systematically disarmed by Ray's officers. "You're not just some widow running a community center, are you?" "No," Ray replied simply, "just like you're not just some thug on a bike. We all have choices, Ghost. Time to make yours." Before he could respond, Mary's voice cut through the comm. "Multiple vehicles approaching, professional operators, heavy weapons, Kane's cleanup crew," Ghost confirmed grimly. "They monitor all our operations. They're coming to eliminate witnesses. All witnesses." Ray studied his face, making a tactical decision. "Help us stop this. Save your men who can be saved. End what Kane's built." Ghost looked at his phone, at the evidence of what his organization had become. Finally, he raised his radio. "All Red Wolves units stand down. I repeat, stand down." Some obeyed immediately. Others, like Bear and Storm, fought harder, but the outcome was inevitable. Ray's officers had trained for this, had prepared contingencies for every scenario. By the time Kane's professional hit team arrived, they found Red Wolves neutralized and a prepared defense waiting. The battle that followed was brief but intense. Kane's men were good, but they faced entrenched officers fighting to protect innocent lives. When it ended, Ray's people had captured valuable intelligence and, more importantly, saved all the young victims. Later, as federal agents processed prisoners and medical teams treated the rescued teenagers, Ray watched Ghost surrender himself to authorities. "Kane's files," he said, handing over his phone. "Everything the organization is doing, every operation, every connection. Use it to burn them down." Coach approached as Ghost was led away. Kane's hit team was professional, former federal agents turned private contractors. "This goes deeper than we thought." "Yes," Ray agreed, studying surveillance footage of the battle. They'll hit back harder now, send everything they have. Mary emerged from the safe house, supporting a trembling teenage girl. She says there are more labs, more kids being used as test subjects in towns across the state. Ray nodded, her mind already formulating plans. Kane thought using corrupt cops would make his operation untouchable. Instead, he gave us the tools to destroy him. He forgot the most important law enforcement lesson. "What's that?" Coach asked. "True cops fight for justice, not profit, and they never abandon those who need protection." Through the rain, Ray watched federal agents lead away Red Wolves members who'd chosen surrender over corruption. Ghost had made his choice. Others would follow. Kane's organization was about to learn why turning law enforcement officers into criminals was their fatal mistake. "They'll come for us now," Coach warned. "Use everything they have." "Good," Ray replied, watching more undercover officers arrive. To reinforce their position, let them come. Some battles need to be fought in the open. The rain continued to fall as Ray's people secured the area, treating wounded, gathering intelligence, preparing for the larger war to come. Kane had built his criminal empire thinking small towns were easy targets. He was about to learn why. That assumption would destroy everything he'd built. Dawn broke over Riverside Valley, revealing the cost of victory. The community center's windows were shattered, its walls pocked with bullet holes. Kane's retribution had been swift and violent. Inside, Ray wheeled through the destruction, cataloging damage while her people tended to the wounded. "Three of our officers took hits," Coach reported, his hand still bloody from treating injuries. "Jack Wilson lost his eye. Peter Chen's got a shattered shoulder. Lisa Ramirez." He paused, composing himself. "She didn't make it." Ray's fingers tightened on her wheelchair's arms. Lisa had been one of their first volunteers, a former vice detective who'd helped countless kids escape addiction. Now she was their first casualty in this escalating war. "They hit 4 other locations simultaneously," Mary added, spreading police reports across a bullet-scarred table. "The safe house in Millbrook, my Café, Pete's Bakery, the church basement where we were hiding witnesses. Professional operators." "Military precision," Ray observed, studying security footage. They knew exactly where to strike. Through the broken windows, they watched Sheriff Anderson's deputies photograph the damage, making a show of investigation while purposefully missing crucial evidence. The corruption ran deep. "Ghost is talking," Coach said quietly, holding up his phone. "Federal agents say he's giving them everything. Operations, safe houses, shell companies. But Kane's already started burning it all down, shifting assets, eliminating witnesses." And quick pause. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will reveal an unprecedented twist that will leave you speechless. Ray moved to the center's basement command post, where surviving surveillance monitors showed Kane's people moving through Riverside Valley with increasing boldness, their message clear: resistance would be punished. "Tommy Rodriguez called," Mary reported, her voice tight with emotion. "His friend Kevin overdosed last night. They're still pushing drugs through the high school, using even younger kids now." The basement door opened as Linda Foster helped another teenage victim down the stairs. The girl's eyes were clearer now, free of drugs, but haunted by what she'd experienced. "Tell them what you told me," Linda encouraged gently. "The organization," the girl began, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not just drugs. They're building something bigger, using small towns, corrupt officials, turned cops, creating a network that spans the whole country. Infrastructure for international cartels," Ray concluded. "Moving people, drugs, weapons, all hidden behind legitimate businesses and corrupt local government." An explosion rocked the building. Through security cameras, they watched Mayor Phillips's building inspector placing condemnation notices on the community center's doors. They're trying to shut us down legally now, Coach observed, while hitting us with force at the same time. Classic cartel tactics, Ray replied, her mind already formulating counter-strategies. Control the population through a combination of violence and legitimate authority. Sarah's phone buzzed with alerts from her cafe's security system. More of Kane's men were arriving in town, taking up positions in properties acquired through Red Wolf's front companies. They're establishing a perimeter, Ray noted, isolating us, cutting off support. Ray, Coach's voice carried urgency. Federal agents found Lisa Ramirez's body. She wasn't just shot, they tortured her first, tried to make her give up. Safe house locations. The room fell silent. Lisa had died protecting innocent lives, refusing to break even under torture. Ray closed her eyes briefly, honoring her friend's sacrifice. They're sending a message, she said finally, trying to break our will to resist, but they don't understand what they've done. Lisa was family, and you don't fight cops the same way you fight civilians. Through the basement's reinforced windows, they watched Kane's men coordinate with corrupt deputies, establishing checkpoints, controlling movement through town. But they also saw something else. Undercover officers arriving quietly, coming in ones and twos, drawn by word of Lisa's murder. They think killing one of us will make us retreat, Coach said, watching former narcotics officers filter into town. Instead, they've just awakened an army. Ray's phone lit up with messages from law enforcement contacts across the country. Lisa's death had ignited something. Officers were mobilizing, coming to help protect Riverside Valley from Kane's organization. Coach, get our new people briefed and equipped. Mary, expand the safe house network. Linda, keep working with the victims. Their testimony is crucial. What about you? Coach asked, recognizing the tactical focus in her voice. I'm going to have a conversation with Ghost. It's time to take this fight to Kane directly. As her team moved to their tasks, Ray studied the condemnation notices on her center's doors. Kane thought he could use bureaucracy and violence to shut them down. He didn't understand that some buildings were more than just structures. Some were symbols of resistance that only grew stronger when attacked. Through her surveillance network, she watched Kane's men establish their occupation of Riverside Valley. They thought they were following a proven strategy for controlling small towns. Instead, they were about to learn why you never martyr someone, beloved by law enforcement who still remembered how to fight. Lisa taught us to protect kids, Ray told her assembled officers. Now she's taught us something else, that some fights choose you, some evils have to be confronted. Kane wanted to send a message, time to send one back. Outside, more undercover officers arrived as night fell. Kane's men watched them with growing unease, sensing the change in atmosphere. They had expected to find a broken resistance. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by law enforcement officers who understood that justice sometimes had to be defended with force. The war for Riverside Valley was entering a new phase. Kane had shown his willingness to kill. Now, he would learn why that was his greatest mistake. Because when you kill a cop, you face the fury of every officer who ever wore the badge. Through her command center's windows, Ray watched the gathering storm. This wasn't just about one small town anymore. It was about stopping an organization that had turned law enforcement officers into unwitting tools for international cartels. Kane had wanted to send a message. He was about to learn why that decision would destroy everything he'd built. The battle for Riverside Valley had become something larger, a fight for the soul of law enforcement itself. And Ray's people were ready to show Kane why you never underestimate the strength of officers united in righteous cause. The county jail's interrogation room felt smaller than its actual dimensions. Ghost sat across from Ray, his Red Wolf's leather, cut replaced by prison orange. Through the observation window, Coach watched with federal agents as Ray placed Philip's hard drive on the table. Lisa Ramirez, Ray said quietly, mother of two, former vice detective who saved 37 kids from addiction. Kane's men tortured her to death last night. Ghost's face tightened. I told them everything I know, names, locations, operations. But there's something else about Kane himself. Operation Kingfisher, Ray pressed. 5 years ago, your name came up in his files. Why? Ghost's eyes dropped to the hard drive. Kingfisher wasn't just about drugs. Kane's building something bigger using cops because... He stopped, studying Ray's face. Because of you. Explain. Your name came up in his files. Operation Stingray 3 years ago. You led the team that almost exposed his entire organization. He's been watching you ever since, waiting for a chance to destroy everything you tried to protect. Outside the jail, thunder rolled across Riverside Valley as storm clouds gathered. Through her earpiece, Ray heard Mary's urgent voice. Mayor Phillips just cleaned out his accounts. He's running. Not just running, Coach added, checking his phone. Our people spotted Kane's extraction team moving into position. They're going to eliminate him as a liability. Ray kept her focus on Ghost. Where would Phillips go first? What evidence would he try to secure? The church. Ghost replied immediately. Underground records room. Original documents proving Kane's connections to foreign cartels, links to overseas operations. Ray's mind rapidly processed tactical options. Phillips was a coward, but he was valuable, both for his evidence and his testimony. Chief, mobilize. Intercept teams. Mary, track Kane's hit squad. What about the feds? Coach asked. They're compromised, Ghost interjected. Kane's got people inside federal law enforcement. That's how he stays ahead of investigations. Ray wheeled herself to the window, watching Kane's men establish sniper positions around town. They were preparing for something bigger than just eliminating Phillips. Talk to me about Stingray, she demanded. Why is Kane obsessed with it? Because you found his weakness, Ghost explained. Proved his operation relies on corrupting cops, using our skills, our need for purpose after leaving the force. When you exposed that pattern, he had to rebuild everything. Now he wants revenge. Mary's voice crackled through the comm. Phillips is moving, heading for the church with a briefcase. Kane's team is right behind him. 4 vehicles, professional operators, Coach added. Ray turned back to Ghost. One last chance to choose sides. Lisa Ramirez died protecting innocent lives. What are you willing to do? Ghost stood, his decision visible in his stance. Kane corrupted everything I thought I was building, used my men as pawns. I'll help you end him. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will reveal a shocking connection that changes everything. Within minutes, they had Phillips's likely route mapped. Ray's officers moved into position as rain began falling, using the weather as cover. Through surveillance cameras, they watched Phillips hurry into the church, unaware he was being hunted. Coach, take Ghost to the records room. Get those documents. Mary, coordinate with our people inside the church. Everyone else, prepare to engage Kane's hit team. The storm intensified as Ray positioned herself near the church's side entrance. Lightning illuminated Kane's operators, taking up assault positions, their movements betraying extensive military training. Phillips is in the records room, Coach reported, but we've got another problem. These documents, they're not just about drugs. Kane's been working with cartels, using small towns as staging areas for international operations. The first shots came as Kane's team breached the church doors. Ray's officers responded with practiced precision, demonstrating why experienced law enforcement was different from hired guns. The battle transformed the holy ground into a tactical engagement zone. Through the chaos, Ray maneuvered toward the records room. She found Phillips trying to burn documents, his hands shaking as papers turned to ash. You don't understand, he babbled. Kane's reach, it goes all the way to Washington. Drug enforcement contracts, intelligence operations, everything hidden behind legitimate businesses. That's why he targeted cops, Ray concluded, using our credentials, our communities as cover for cartel operations. An explosion rocked the church's foundation. Through her earpiece, Ray heard coaches warning, Kane's main force is moving in, at least 30 operators, heavy weapons. Get Phillips and the documents out, Ray ordered. Use the underground tunnel network we mapped. Ray, Mary's voice carried urgency, found something in Phillips' files, shipping manifests. They're using our police transport routes to move product internationally. The revelation hit hard, adding another layer to their mission, but before Ray could respond, a familiar voice filled the church's speaker system. Hello, Rachel. Kane's cultured tones carried through the gunfire. I've waited 3 years to finish what we started in Stingray. You exposed part of my operation, then forced me to adapt. Now I'm going to take everything from you, your town, your officers, your legacy of resistance. Ray's officers engaged Kane's forces in the storm-swept streets as lightning transformed the night into stark moments of illumination. This wasn't just about Riverside Valley anymore. It was about stopping an organization that had turned law enforcement into unwitting tools for international cartels. Coach, get everyone into fallback positions, she commanded. Kane wants to end this tonight, but he's about to learn why you don't corner wounded cops. The battle for Riverside Valley was becoming something larger, a fight to expose corruption that reached into the highest levels of law enforcement. Through the rain, Ray watched her officers demonstrate why experience and righteous purpose would always overcome mere training and money. Kane had chosen this town to destroy her. Instead, he'd given her the means to destroy everything he'd built. The storm raged on as two forces clashed in the darkness, one fighting for profit and power, the other for justice and redemption. Ray wheeled herself into position, coordinating her forces, while the thunder crashed overhead. Kane thought he was finishing what started 3 years ago. Instead, he was about to learn why you never underestimate an officer who spent their career fighting corruption, especially one with nothing left to lose. The church's basement had become a battlefield. Water pooled on the floor from broken pipes as Ray's officers engaged Kane's operators in close-quarter combat. Above them, thunder crashed as the storm intensified, matching the violence below. South entrance breached, Coach reported through the comm. They're trying to flank us through the chapel. Ray wheeled herself through the chaos with practiced efficiency, her chair modified for tactical maneuverability. 2 of Kane's men rounded the corner, their weapons ready, but they hesitated for a crucial second at the sight of a woman in a wheelchair. Their mistake. Ray's response was instant and precise, years of undercover training evident in her takedown methods. The documents, she commanded as Ghost secured the fallen operator's weapons. Where would Phillips hide the originals? Old confessional, Ghost replied, providing cover as they moved. Hollow panel behind the priest's side. Used it for dead. Drops during initial operations. Through her earpiece, Mary's voice carried urgency. Ray, these shipping manifests, they're coded, but they show regular transport routes through police checkpoints. Kane's using law enforcement credentials to move product across state lines. He's not just corrupting cops, Ray realized. He's using our badges, our authority to bypass security protocols. The confessional lay ahead, but Kane's men had it surrounded. Through the basement windows, lightning illuminated more operators. Taking up positions outside, they were being boxed in. Coach, status on Phillips? Securing the tunnel system, Coach responded. But he's talking now. Kane's operation, it goes deeper than we thought. Drug enforcement contracts, black market deals, everything hidden behind legitimate police operations. An explosion rocked the church's foundation. Through security feeds, Ray watched Kane's main force prepare for a final push. But something in their movement caught her attention. "They're not just trying to get the documents," she observed. "They're herding us. This is about more than eliminating evidence." "Ray," Ghost's voice carried sudden recognition. "The confessional. Kane modified it when we first took control of the church. Added something. Explosives," she finished. "He's not trying to recover the documents. He's trying to bury them. Bury all of us." As if confirming her words, Kane's voice echoed through the church's speaker system. "You're wondering about the confessional, Rachel, about why my men are maneuvering you toward it. Operation Stingray taught me to always have a backup plan, always be willing to sacrifice. Pieces to win the game." "Everyone clear the basement," Ray commanded. "Coach, get our people into the tunnel network. Ghost, help me reach those documents." Quick pause. If you're enjoying this intense story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will reveal a connection that changes everything. They fought their way to the confessional as Kane's men pulled back suspiciously fast. Inside, behind the hollow panel, they found not just documents, but a sophisticated explosive device. The timer was already counting down. "I can't disarm it in time," Ghost warned, studying the mechanism. 2 minutes max." "We don't need to." "Disarm it," Ray replied, beginning to photograph documents rapidly. "Just buy me time to preserve the evidence." Through her comm, she heard Coach coordinating the evacuation, getting their wounded to safety. Mary's voice cut through the chaos. "Ray, there's more. These records, Kane's been blackmailing officers, threatening their families to force them to work for him." The revelation hit hard, explaining why so many good cops had turned corrupt. Kane wasn't just buying law enforcement, he was enslaving them through their own loyalty to family. 1 minute, Ghost warned as Ray finished, photographing the last documents. Above them, Kane's men had completely withdrawn. "He's watching," Ray realized, "waiting to confirm we're destroyed, along with his evidence." She activated her comm. "All units clear the blast radius, prepare for secondary explosions." As they rushed to safety through the tunnel network, Ray's mind processed what they'd learned. Kane wasn't just running a drug empire. He was building a shadow network, using law enforcement authority to serve cartel interests. The explosion, when it came, seemed to shake all of Riverside Valley. The church's basement collapsed, burying the original documents, but not before Ray had preserved their contents. Through surveillance cameras, she watched Kane's men sweep the area, confirming the destruction. In their underground command post, Ray reviewed the photographed evidence with her team. "Kane's operation is bigger than we imagined," she explained. "He's not just moving drugs. He's corrupting entire police departments, using our own law enforcement networks as cover for cartel operations. That's why he had to stop us," Coach added. "We're not just exposing criminal activity, we're exposing systematic corruption of law enforcement." Mary studied shipping manifests, tracking possible routes. These transport lines, they all connect to police stations, evidence lockups, places where no one questions official vehicles. "He's perverted everything we stand for," Ghost said, quietly. "Turned law enforcement into a cover for international crime." Through their surveillance network, they watched Kane's forces regroup, preparing for their next move. But something had changed. Local officers, seeing the church's destruction, were emerging from their homes, silent figures taking up positions, choosing sides. "Kane thinks he's won," Ray observed. "Thinks destroying evidence will end this. He doesn't understand what he's really done." "What's that?" Coach asked. "He's shown every honest cop in Riverside Valley exactly what he thinks of their badge, their oath. By destroying a church to cover his crimes, he's removed all doubt about what we're fighting." Outside, more officers arrived as news of the battle spread. Kane had tried to bury the truth in rubble. Instead, he'd created a rallying point, a symbol of resistance that would draw law enforcement from across the country. He'll hit us harder now, Ghost warned. Use everything he has. Good, Ray replied, watching her forces grow stronger by the hour, because now we have something he doesn't. What's that? An army of officers who understand what they're really fighting for. And nothing is more dangerous than cops who have found a righteous cause. The storm continued to rage over Riverside Valley, but beneath the thunder, a different kind of storm was gathering. Kane had built his power by corrupting law enforcement. Now he would fall because he'd underestimated their true strength. Not their badges or authority, but their unshakable commitment to justice and truth. Through the command center's windows, Ray watched more officers arrive, drawn by purpose rather than payment. Kane's organization had thought they could silence witnesses and destroy evidence. Instead, they faced coordinated resistance from law enforcement officers who remembered their oaths. The battle for Riverside Valley had become something larger, a fight for the soul of law enforcement itself. And Ray's people were ready to show Kane why you never underestimate the strength of officers united in righteous cause. The Veterans Center basement had become a war room. Surveillance feeds showed Kane's forces establishing defensive positions throughout Riverside Valley, their numbers growing hourly. Ray studied their deployment patterns, recognizing the work of someone who understood police tactics. Latest intel, Coach reported, laying out satellite photos. 3 armored vehicles arrived at the abandoned warehouse district, heavy weapons, professional operators. Kane's bringing in his elite teams. Mary burst in, clutching printouts from Phillips's. Files. Found something in the shipping records. They're moving something big through their transport network. Multiple high-value shipments, all converging on Riverside Valley. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this intense story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will reveal a shocking betrayal that changes everything. Before Ray could respond, explosions rocked the community center above them. Kane's forces had launched their first major assault. Through security feeds, they watched elite operators breach the upper floors with military precision. All units execute Protocol Echo, Ray commanded through her tactical network. Her officers responded with practiced efficiency, demonstrating why experience trumped mere training. Kane's men found themselves caught in prepared kill zones, facing defenders who understood real police work. Ray, Coach's voice carried urgency. Phillips is talking, says Kane's coming personally to oversee this operation. Something about special cargo that has to move through Riverside Valley tonight. Through the firefight, Ray maneuvered her wheelchair with tactical precision, coordinating her force's defense. 2 of Kane's operators rounded a corner, their weapons ready, but they weren't prepared for her response. Years of undercover operations showed in her efficient takedowns. They're pushing too hard, she observed, studying enemy movements. This isn't just about silencing us anymore. They need control of Riverside Valley for something specific. Mary monitored police bands as corrupt deputies coordinated with Kane's forces. Roadblocks are going up on all major routes. They're isolating the town. Not just the town, Ghost interjected, understanding dawning in his eyes. The highways, the rail yard, all transportation infrastructure. They're turning Riverside Valley into a transport hub for something big. More explosions shook the building as Kane's men tried to breach the center's reinforced lower levels, but Ray's officers held firm, their defensive positions carefully prepared over months of planning. Status on our wounded? Ray asked. Medical teams keeping up, Coach reported, but we're running low on supplies. Mary's Café has become a field hospital. Through their surveillance network, they watched more of Kane's forces arrive, elite teams with specialized equipment. But they also saw something else. Officers continuing to filter into town, drawn by word of the resistance. Kane's reaching too far, Ray noted, getting sloppy in his rush to control Riverside Valley. Ghost, what do you make of these deployment patterns? Ghosts studied the tactical displays. They're establishing a security corridor from the warehouse district to the rail yard. Whatever they're moving, it's coming by truck and leaving by rail or vice versa. Using legitimate police transport as cover, Ray added. Moving through checkpoints without inspection, because who searches a police vehicle? Mary's computer chimed with decoded transmissions. Multiple references to Project Legacy in their communications, something about securing the package before morning. The community center shook with another explosion, but Ray's defenders held firm. Through the chaos, she coordinated their response, demonstrating why combat experience always beat theoretical training. Found something, Coach reported, examining Philip's files. Project Legacy. It's not just about drugs. Kane's organization has been gathering compromising information on law enforcement officials, using it to force cooperation. They're building a shadow network inside police departments. That's why he needs Riverside Valley, Ray realized. Small town, isolated, perfect transit point for moving blackmail material without scrutiny. But he needs corrupt police departments as cover to move through law enforcement channels. Ghost's face showed disgust. Using our own people against the departments we served, corrupting everything we swore to protect. A massive explosion tore through the community center's upper floors. Through security feeds, they watched Kane's elite teams prepare for a final push, but something in their deployment caught Ray's attention. They're not just attacking, she observed, they're positioning for defense, preparing for something bigger than us. Ray, Mary's voice shook slightly. Intercepted transmission, the special cargo they're bringing through tonight? It's people. Law enforcement officials being brought in for negotiations under duress. Kane's consolidating his control over key police leadership. The revelation hit hard. This wasn't just about building a criminal empire anymore. Kane was staging a shadow takeover, using compromised officers as his tools. All units, Ray commanded. Through her tactical network, fall back to secondary positions. Let them think they're winning while we prepare our counterstrike. As her forces executed a fighting retreat, Ray watched Kane's men secure the community center. They thought they were achieving their objective. Instead, they were walking into a trap set by someone who understood that true victory often required apparent defeat. He's coming, Ghost warned, monitoring communications. Kane himself bringing his personal security detail. Good, Ray replied, watching more officers arrive to reinforce their positions. Let him come. Time to show him why you don't build. An empire by corrupting cops. Eventually, they remember what they really fought for. The battle for Riverside Valley was becoming something larger, a fight for the integrity of law enforcement itself. Through the chaos of combat, Ray prepared her forces for the true confrontation to come. Kane thought he was consolidating power. Instead, he was about to learn why some betrayals can never be forgiven. The storm outside intensified, matching the growing tension as both sides prepared for what promised to be the final, decisive battle for Riverside Valley's soul. Through her command center's windows, Ray watched the gathering storm. This wasn't just about one small town anymore. It was about stopping an organization that had turned law enforcement officers into unwitting tools for criminal enterprises. Kane had wanted to send a message. He was about to learn why that decision would destroy everything he'd built. The battle for Riverside Valley had become a symbol of something larger, a fight to reclaim law enforcement honor from those who would corrupt it. And Ray's people were ready to show Kane why you never underestimate the strength of officers united in righteous cause. Midnight turned Riverside Valley's rain-slicked streets into mirrors, reflecting the arrival of Kane's convoy. 3 armored SUVs, flanked by motorcycles, rolled through town like a conquering army. From her concealed position, Ray watched the man. She'd hunted for 3 years, step onto Main Street. Target confirmed, Coach reported through her earpiece. Kane's got at least 20 personal security with him, all former law enforcement turned private contractors. Kane looked exactly as Ray remembered, tall, distinguished, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the tactical gear worn by his security detail. He surveyed the community center's battle damage with something like satisfaction. "Rachel," he called out, his voice carrying clearly through the rain. "I know you're watching. Time we had a proper reunion. Multiple teams moving through back streets," Mary warned through the comm. "They're trying to flank your position." Ray wheeled herself into view, knowing her officers had Kane's forces covered from prepared positions. "Took you long enough to show up? Still calling yourself director since selling out?" Kane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Still bitter about Stingray? That operation taught me something valuable, how to turn police loyalty into a weapon. Your team almost exposed everything back then." "Almost," Ray said. "You were running cartel operations through police departments even then." Through her earpiece, Coach reported movement at the warehouse district. Large trucks arriving, their contents being transferred to waiting trains. Kane was running his operation even during this confrontation. "I built something remarkable," Kane continued, pacing like a professor giving a lecture. "A network that spans the country, moves anything, anywhere, all protected by legitimate police credentials. The perfect cover. Who would suspect decorated officers? The kids you got hooked on drugs," Ray challenged. "The officers you blackmailed, the departments you corrupted, that's what you call remarkable?" Kane's face hardened. "Necessary. Tools for a larger purpose. Project Legacy isn't just about profit, it's about control. Police departments, evidence chains, interstate operations, all running through my network." "Sir," one of his security team interrupted urgently, "we've got movement, multiple contacts approaching from all directions." Through the rain, figures emerged, officers who'd been arriving steadily since the fighting started. They moved, with the quiet confidence of experienced law enforcement, taking up positions around Kane's forces. "Your mistake," Ray said quietly, "was thinking you could control cops forever, that loyalty and duty could be corrupted indefinitely." "My mistake," Kane corrected, "was leaving you alive after Stingray." He raised a hand, signaling his security team. "A mistake I'll correct tonight." Quick pause. If you're enjoying this intense story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will reveal a shocking truth that changes everything. Before his men could act, more officers appeared, their weapons trained on Kane's forces. Ghost stepped forward, followed by former Red Wolves members who'd chosen to switch sides. "Stand down!" Ghost ordered Kane's security detail. "You're surrounded by real cops, not mercenaries." Through her tactical network, Ray heard Mary's excited voice. "Decoded transmission confirms movement schedule. They're bringing in at least 12 blackmailed police officials tonight, all being forced to implement Kane's directives in their departments." Understanding dawned in Ray's eyes. That's what Project Legacy really is. You're not just running criminal operations. You're staging a takeover, using compromised officials to control law enforcement operations nationwide. Kane's smile returned, colder now. "Very good, Rachel. Always were the smartest investigator I commanded. Yes, by morning Riverside Valley will host a gathering of influential police leaders, all of them controlled through leverage we've gathered, all of them ready to implement our directives throughout law enforcement." "Not going to happen," Ray replied firmly. "Your network ends here." "Really?" Kane gestured at the damaged community center. "You've lost your base, your forces are scattered, your resources exhausted." "No," Ray corrected. "We've got something you forgot about, something you can't control or corrupt. And what's that? Real cops fighting for the right reasons." As if on cue, more officers emerged from the shadows. Kane's security team shifted nervously, recognizing they were outmatched not in numbers but in experience. and determination. Sir, his security chief warned, we need to move the cargo. Can't wait. Kane studied Ray with genuine curiosity. You'd risk everything to stop me? Risk exposing how deeply corruption runs in law enforcement? The public might never trust police again. Some truths have to be told, Ray replied. Some fights have to be fought, no matter the cost. The rain intensified as the two former colleagues faced each other across rain-slicked streets. Kane had built an empire by corrupting police loyalty. Now he faced the consequences of underestimating that same loyalty's power to resist corruption. You've got one chance, Ray offered. Surrender. Help us expose the corruption or learn why you never should have taught us how to fight. Kane's response was instant. Kill them all. The battle that erupted would decide not just Riverside Valley's fate, but the future of law, enforcement integrity across the country. Through the chaos, Ray coordinated her forces with practiced precision, demonstrating why true loyalty would always overcome mere obedience. The war for Riverside Valley's soul had reached its turning point. By dawn, the town would either fall to Kane's corruption or become a symbol of law enforcement resistance that would echo across the nation. Through her command center's windows, Ray watched the final battle unfold. This wasn't just about one small town anymore. It was about stopping an organization that had turned law enforcement officers into unwitting tools for criminal enterprises. Kane had wanted to send a message. He was about to learn why that decision would destroy everything he'd built. The battle for Riverside Valley had become something larger, a fight to reclaim police honor from those who would corrupt it. And Ray's people were ready to show Kane why you never underestimate the strength of officers united in righteous cause. The battle for Riverside Valley erupted like a sudden storm. Kane's security forces opened fire first, but Ray's officers were ready. Years of law enforcement experience showed in their coordinated response as they engaged from prepared positions across town. Multiple teams breaching the warehouse district, Coach reported through the tactical network. They're trying to secure their transport route. Ray wheeled through the chaos with practiced efficiency, coordinating her forces while Kane's men learned the hard way why you don't fight cops in their own territory. Every street had become a prepared battlefield, every building a potential stronghold. South Sector secured, Ghost reported, leading former Red Wolves members who'd switched sides. But we've got incoming. Looks like police transport vehicles, not Kane's usual operators. Through her surveillance network, Ray watched 3 unmarked vans approach the warehouse district. Those aren't regular police, she observed. Check. The markings. Private contractors, probably bringing in the officials Kane's blackmailing. Ray. Mary's voice cut through the comm chatter. Found manifests for prisoner transport. The kids they forced into addiction. They're moving them. 2, using the officials' arrival as cover to relocate their test subjects. The revelation sparked immediate tactical adjustments. Coach, redirect medical teams to the warehouse. Ghost, get your fastest people in position. When those vans open... An explosion cut her off as Kane's forces detonated charges along Main Street, trying to cut the town in half. But Ray had anticipated this, her officers already moving through prepared alternate routes. Sir, one of Kane's commanders reported loudly enough for their surveillance to pick up, we've lost contact with 3 security teams. These aren't just cops, they're fighting with coordinated tactics, strategic objectives. Kane's response was cold, because they're being led by someone who knows our playbook. Rachel trained under me before Stingray. She knows how we operate. Through the rain, Ray watched Kane direct his forces from a mobile command post. He was good, each move calculated, each position reinforced. But he'd forgotten the most important law enforcement lesson. No plan survives contact with determined resistance. Multiple casualties at the Café, Coach reported. Kane's men hit our medical station hard. They're targeting support infrastructure. Quick pause. If you're loving this intense story, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode will reveal a connection that changes everything. They're not just trying to destroy evidence anymore, Ray observed. They're eliminating everyone who might talk. Mary pointed to new movement on their monitors. These patterns, they're evacuating key positions, moving assets to fallback locations, but there's something else. A trap, Ray finished, seeing the larger tactical picture. They're trying to draw our forces into prepared kill zones. Coach, redirect medical teams. Ghost, get your people clear. But the warning came too late for some. Through their surveillance network, they watched officers under attack worldwide. Kane's partners were demonstrating the ruthlessness that had kept their operation hidden for years. 4 rescue teams pinned down at the warehouse, Ghost reported urgently. Heavy resistance at every extraction point. They knew we were coming, Mary realized, studying communication patterns. Some officials are still working with them, warning them of our movements. Ray's mind raced through tactical options. Their network had grown strong, but with strength came vulnerability. Every new ally was a potential security risk. Latest from federal agencies, Coach announced grimly. Kane's partners are pushing back hard. 3 judges who approved our warrants just received evidence of their own past misconduct. They're being blackmailed into blocking our operations. Through command center windows, they watched more officers arrive at Riverside Valley, responding to calls for reinforcement. What had started as one town's resistance had become a nationwide battle for law enforcement integrity. Multiple facilities breached, Ghost reported. But the casualties, he paused, composing himself. They're not just fighting back, they're executing witnesses. Because they know we're close, Ray replied, studying tactical displays. Their whole network is exposed, their police protection compromised. All they have left is violence. Ghost returned from coordinating field operations, his expression grim. We've got movement at major transport hubs. They're trying to move their entire operation overnight. Test subjects, evidence, everything. Not trying, Ray corrected, seeing the larger pattern. Executing their contingency plan. Coach, get all medical teams on alert. Mary, coordinate with witness protection. Ghost, we need everything you remember about their evacuation protocols. Through their surveillance system, they watched Kane's forces mobilizing nationwide. Vehicles converging on hidden facilities, corrupt officers providing cover, everything moving at once. This is it, Ray announced to her assembled team. They're making their final play, trying to preserve their network by moving everything simultaneously. But that's their mistake. Why? Coach asked. Because now we can see their whole operation, in motion. Every transport, every facility, every corrupt official involved. Ghost, get your teams in position. Coach, coordinate with loyal officers. It's time to end this. Outside, more officers arrived as dawn approached, drawn by the largest law enforcement operation in recent history. The fight that had started in Riverside Valley had become a nationwide battle to protect police integrity from corruption. Through her command center's windows, Ray watched her people prepare for nationwide engagement. Kane's organization thought they could preserve their network through one massive evacuation. Instead, they were about to learn why you never show your whole operation to officers who've spent their lives studying criminal patterns. The final battle was about to begin, and this time there would be nowhere left to hide. Ray watched through tactical displays as her forces took position around the warehouse district. Kane had built his empire on corrupted loyalty. Now he would learn why that was his fatal mistake. All units, execute Operation Justice, she commanded. Around the warehouse district, officers emerged from concealed positions, their movements showing years of law enforcement experience. Kane's men found themselves caught in a carefully prepared crossfire. "Sir!" One of Kane's commanders shouted. "We're getting hit from multiple angles." These aren't random attacks. They're using advanced police tactics. Because they're being led by someone who understands real law enforcement, Kane replied, his voice carrying over their intercepted communications. Rachel always was my best student until she developed a conscience. The battle intensified as both sides demonstrated the highest levels of police training, but Ray's officers had something Kane's mercenaries lacked, a cause worth dying for. Through the rain-soaked streets of Riverside Valley, justice was finally coming for those who'd corrupted the badge. By dawn, the nation would learn just how far a few dedicated officers would go to protect the honor of law enforcement and why you never underestimate the power of cops fighting for what's right. 1 month after the nationwide operation, the Riverside Valley Community Center stood restored, its battle scars repaired but not forgotten. Ray wheeled through halls now filled with purpose rather than violence. The center had become something new, a symbol of law enforcement resistance against corruption. "Final numbers confirmed," Coach reported, updating their situation board. 43 cartel facilities shut down nationwide, over 200 kids rescued from drug operations, 150 corrupt officials exposed. He paused. But the cost, 32. Officers gave their lives, Ray acknowledged quietly. Their names will be remembered as heroes who died protecting the innocent. Mary and Ghost entered carrying fresh intelligence from their growing witness protection network. Ghost had found redemption through helping others find freedom from Kane's organization. 2 more police departments identified with corruption, Ghost reported, his voice carrying strength earned through atonement. But they're different now. Legitimate departments implementing new protection protocols. Our new security measures are working. Through the center's windows, they watched Coach training new officer security teams. The former Red Wolves leader had found true purpose in protecting rather than intimidating. Latest from Washington, Coach announced. Congressional investigation is expanding. Kane's testimony exposed corruption, reaching into every level of law enforcement leadership. But not the top, Ray noted, studying intelligence reports. The real architects of this operation are still out there, hiding, but not gone. Quick, pause. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, you've got 2 more incredible stories waiting for you right on your screen. Don't miss them. Click to watch now. Coach approached with updates about their growing network. Our protection protocols are expanding. Police departments nationwide implementing new security measures. No more infiltration of law enforcement. Because we're watching now, Mary added. Every department, every operation, every transport route. They'll never use our badges as cover for criminal operations again. Through their surveillance feeds, they monitored continuing operations nationwide. The law enforcement network had become something powerful, a force for protecting their communities from corruption. Kane's asking to speak with you, Ghost reported. Says he has one last piece of information about the people he really worked for. Ray studied tactical displays showing their expanding influence. What had started as one town's resistance had become a nationwide movement for police protection. The world changed, Mary observed, watching witness protection teams deploy across the country. Not just stopping corruption, showing that law enforcement united can't be corrupted or controlled. Because we remembered what we really fought for, Ray replied. Not just enforcing laws, but protecting those who need protection, standing against evil wherever it hides. Sarah monitored reports from reformed police departments nationwide. Every corrupt officer we expose, every kid we save from their drug operations, every department we protect, it all started here in Riverside Valley. No, Ray corrected gently. It started with choice. Officers choosing honor over profit, choosing to fight corruption rather than submit to it, choosing to stand together rather than be controlled through fear. Through the center's windows, they watched more officers arrive, not for battle now, but for training, learning to recognize corruption, to protect their departments, to maintain the network they'd built. What we created here, Coach observed, it's bigger than just fighting cartels. We've built something they never expected, a network of officers who remember their true purpose. Officers who can't be bought or corrupted or controlled, Ghost added, studying operation maps showing their expanding influence. Mary looked at the global tactical display. The people above Kane, the ones who really controlled everything, they're still out there, still trying to rebuild their operation. Let them try, Ray replied with quiet certainty. They'll learn what Kane learned, that you can't corrupt. Law enforcement forever, that real officers never stop fighting for justice. Outside, Riverside Valley had healed from its battles, transformed into something stronger. The community center stood as a symbol not just of resistance, but of redemption, proof that even the darkest corruption could be overcome by officers united in righteous cause. We lost good people, Coach said softly. Officers who died protecting others. And we honor them by continuing their fight, Ray responded, by ensuring no police department ever faces corruption alone again, by remembering why we took the badge in the first place. Through her command center windows, Ray watched the high future of their mission unfold. Riverside Valley had shown the nation something powerful, that honor once awakened was stronger than any corruption, that law enforcement united could never be truly defeated. The real war isn't over, Mary noted, monitoring intelligence. The people behind Kane, they'll try again, try to rebuild their network, find new ways to corrupt police departments. Good, Ray replied, watching her people prepare for continuing operations. Let them try, because now they'll face something they never expected. What's that? Ghost asked. Officers who remember their true purpose. Law enforcement that can't be bought or corrupted. A network of protectors who understand that some battles choose you, and that fighting evil is always worth the cost. The sun set over Riverside Valley as Ray's officers continued their mission. The battle that had started in one small town had become something lasting, a nationwide commitment to protect law enforcement honor from corruption. Through the gathering darkness, they stood ready to face whatever challenges came, ready to protect those who needed protection, ready to show the world why true officers never stopped fighting for justice. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.